Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
Obviously, when we act for a vendor, we draft into our vendor's favour. As a purchaser, we do. But there is a middle ground.
Mm. And just also, I mean, when you're not only special conditions, but anyone who signs a contract without having it legally vetted in the first instance has got rocks in their head.
Well, that's my next point, contract reviews.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So established properties, one side. Do you do many contract reviews for off the plans and recommend they go ahead?
We don't make the choice as to what.
Yeah, I framed that question wrong, didn't I? on the basis of your
Okay,
advice.
no liability for that one. We'll go and try it again.
Yeah, I'll reframe. But on the basis of your advice, is it your observation that people proceed or not proceed?
Proceed.
Huh?
They'll get a 4-page report, usually 4 or 5 pages for an off the plan. It takes, on average, 2 hours for me to read through 400 pages, 200 pages, because it's not standard. There's always a clause that's worded differently. One word can change the intent of a clause. A comma can change the intent of a clause. So grammar, the punctuation, everything is very particular. So you'll find that when a developer goes to a top end of town law firm, a mid-tier, top-tier law firm, I know they're paying 6 figures for overall legal advice. So I don't mind their contracts. They usually have no give in them, but I don't mind them because I know that a big firm in town is not going to try and do the wrong thing or an unconscionable thing against a purchaser just to try and make an extra couple of bucks along the way.
Yep.
So I can only recall in the last 8 years 2 clients who decided to not proceed after a review. Both were young. And which is really good because they thought about the sunset clause. And one girl said to me, there's too many risks in here. She was a very, very smart, level-headed girl. The other guy was, well, I could move overseas for my work and I don't really like these risks. He ended up buying 2 years later and off the plan, but a completely different situation and scenario, and he's really happy he didn't buy the first one. So they pay for that advice, and it's the best insurance that they've spent.
Yeah, totally, especially if the values aren't going to perform.
Which is, an extension of Ben's point in terms of just generally, how many contracts cross your desk that people haven't had you review beforehand, and how important is it to have that review beforehand?
Well, if I be really honest, I love it when a client doesn't have a contract reviewed first because it's less work for me. And that's the good old days when we didn't have an email. Back in the 90s, I used to just to have contracts just land on my desk day after day after day. And our first letter of advice was 2 pages. Here's the transfer. That's it. Now we have to do, it's around about about 8 pages of the first letter of advice and about 15 pages of attachments. That's why we really want electronic conveyancing and we really embrace PEXA.
Yep.
For the average punter, it is advisable that they get legal advice prior to signing. We do not act as your agent. We do not tell you how to make your offer to the agent. We strongly recommend you go to Empower and get your buyer's advocate doing that job for you. I can't stress that enough because we are asked to step into the world of being an agent at times. But if we're giving legal advice, we give the facts and it's black and white. It's up to you as the individual client to work out what your tolerances are to that.
Yeah, and that's obviously any good buyer's agent, not just us. The podcast is about general listening and making sure education.
There's lots of great buyer's agents out there.
Terrific buyer's agents.
Didn't realise we're on the ABC.
No advertising. We share the love, no advertising. We share the love because that's what it's all about. It's about education and knowledge. And I mean, look, we're only just warming up. We're going to keep flying through. So, big mistakes.
2 parts.
Yeah, I'm really, really keen to understand big parts. Big parts. Big mistakes. 2 parts. Big mistakes. I'm keen to understand big mistakes. What are some of the crackers that you've seen, as part of what you do?
Building inspection clauses, poorly worded, drafted so that they heavily favour a vendor, and the building inspection is carried out and there's major structural defects according to an independent building professional, someone who is a licensed registered builder, has determined that the whole house needs underpinning, reblocking. That might be a $50,000 cost.
So you've got something's come up in mind without names and pack drill?
Yep. And it was a $370,000 house in Thomastown or Reservoir. Yep. It was a first home buyer. They signed the contract with the agent's clause for the building inspection. The report came in. It was the whole place needed to be underpinned. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the resultant damage is plaster. And then, so they said somewhere between 50 and 70,000. The agent and the vendor refused to accept that was structural and upheld the contract and said the purchaser's got to proceed. They'd only paid $1,000 deposit. So when the client came to me, they were on the last day of the clause. They didn't get advice prior and they didn't get the contract reviewed. Okay. We got them out of the contract. We did get their $1,000 back. There were a lot of threats that we had to make along the way for, I guess, the professional misconduct, particularly of the agent and some of the commentary that he gave and provided to my client. But that's one of the biggest sticking points, the biggest mistakes that we see.
Yep.
You know, chattels are, to me, when you buy a property, we've given the legal, the definition of what conveyancing is, but all you're legally entitled to receive as a purchaser on the day of settlement is a certificate of title. You're not entitled to receive a house in pristine condition. The fact that there is a house or a structure atop a piece of land is irrelevant to the conveyancing process. Certificate of title, day of settlement. That's what you're entitled to.
Well, take, for example, the classic case of when they take a spa out. Like they're one of the portable spas and it's advertised with portable spa, and then they get there and the spa's gone. And so if that's not in the chattels, then we've heard stories like that.
Yep.
I've even heard stories from the real estate dispute resolution, consumer affairs. They've taken the light bulbs out. They've taken the light bulbs out.
Yeah.
60-cent light bulbs.
Yes.
The vendors decided to take his light bulbs with him.
We've seen it all. I've had a
Look after the pennies, mate.
fireplace.
The pounds take care of themselves.
I had a vendor client take a fireplace in mantle out from an old property in Essendon years ago.
Oops.
Now that's a
real
fixed
estate
structure.
Agent. Yes. I had another client take out another vendor client take out the reverse cycle wall-mounted air conditioner. And it was tenanted. So
that's part of the fixtures. That's part
yes.
of it. Yeah.
But we went back to him and said, the purchaser requires this to be reinstated. And he said, it's not a structure. It was just simply plonked into the wall as an ornament,
so
but it was
like
never hardwired.
The dishwasher can be dragged out because it's in a box.
Every chattel can be removed, because how did it get annexed in the first place? You've put it in, put it in, you can take it out.
Yeah.
It just depends on the degree of annexation to the property. So if it's hardwired, you go, yes, that absolutely. But his argument back to us, and he was trying to outsmart all of us, is that it wasn't hardwired. The cord was just simply hanging in the cavity of the wall, and it was there to fill a hole. So, I made the decision that I would not deal with him again, because that to me is an integrity thing.
Absolutely.
And but we've seen the best and the worst, but usually we're on the receiving end for the purchaser. But I'll just tell you quickly what your rights are as a purchaser under a standard contract. If the property is not in the same condition, say fair wear and tear, the purchaser is entitled to retain up to $5,000 from the vendor's money to be held in trust pending resolution. But that is to allow the settlement to proceed through. And if the purchaser must also match that amount. You want to take $5,000 from the purchaser, from the vendor, you've got to put in $5,000 as well. It sits in either party's trust account, and then you go through your resolution.
Is that Victorian law or is that national?
That's Victorian. It's General Condition 24.4.
Impressive.
And, I'll tell you what, this stuff costs thousands of dollars when you get this type of advice. But
I'll bill you later.
Yeah, on behalf of the Property Couch listeners, we'll foot the bill.
Tick, 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 tick. Let's keep talking.
Wait a minute, the Property Couch told me once. So these are this is gold. I mean, I'll tell you what, there's going to be people listening to this over and over again.
Can I just qualify that clause, though? There are some contracts where a special condition will override that clause. So they'll cancel it out, but the purchaser is usually not happy because it asks them to put in money as well. So that's why if we go back to the number one wish list for me is having a good chattels clause where you actually put down all of the elements, those 6 elements that I was talking about before, that the vendor pays for this, that the vendor will repair it or whatever it might be. If the vendor chooses to not repair a damaged item, then what can we do? Let's have an amount put down of $1,000 to be retained at settlement.
Yep.
In a buyer's market or an equilibrium market, that's straightforward. In a seller's market, because I put that clause in, and often when as a competing, so it's
auctions, you won't get it.
Yeah, that's right.
You won't get it.
There was a key takeaway there. You said so. What the buyer is actually getting is a certificate of title. That's all, and whatever they've agreed to within the contract. So that's essentially what they're getting.
Yeah.
A lot of buyers expect the house to look pristine at settlement,
but they didn't even clean it.
The owner can leave the place looking like a dump.
Yeah.
I know. And we get those calls.
And that's totally fine.
I'll charge you extra for that sort of a call because it's not my job. I'm not interested in cleaning. I'm interested in making sure that you get a good, clean, seamless transaction. You do not inherit any of the debt. You get very good advice along the way, but I'm not interested in the maintenance or the repair of an item unless it is specifically worded into the contract, because a special condition is something that we have to then administer and give advice on and make sure that it's enforceable. But a lot of these conditions are not enforceable on a vendor. So we will always preface the conversation with the client that there could be additional fees if we are to chase up for the next 3 hours or next 3 days that the house is not in a good condition or there's rubbish or debris left at the property.
So,
sorry, can I just finish on that point?
Yeah.
So if the rubbish and debris is there and the fact that it's dirty and messy, that's the vendor's totally within their rights. Where's the fine line between leaving the joint with,
It's called karma.
It is. It's karma, and that's what we had a property out west and Wild West, and because we didn't facilitate an early deposit release under Section 27, which is a state-centric pain in the backside, we would love to have it repealed, that we couldn't facilitate it for a number of reasons. It was a very quick settlement as well. The vendor and the agent got pretty upset with that. And then on the day of settlement, it was almost like the vendor rang his mates and said, "Can you bring me all your rubbish?" The place, we had photos sent to us, and it was just devastating. We don't get involved in the emotional side of what a client is going through because it's already emotional for them. We're trying to just simmer it down, calm it down, and say, look, let's stick to the facts. Let's walk you through this. But the house, it was disgraceful. It was like squatters had been living there, and my client couldn't do anything about it.
So this comes back to rent to buys and people in some. I'm not saying for your particular client, but there are absolutely times where people take advantage of those people less fortunate. So let's say it is a property that is in a foreclosure situation. That couple have lost their job, they've got a medical illness, they don't have enough money, no one's interested in buying a property, they've got to fire sale that property. And if the buyer's then getting arrogant and getting smart ass about the whole thing, that annoys me. And obviously this, in some cases, there may have been this angst or anger that they've gone and said, oh, okay, well, I'm going to dump all my crap on the property. So this is where it's got to be win-win. The whole idea of negotiating is to try and get the best outcome for both parties, not to get to a point where you're making money out of other people's misery. Just don't do it. I mean, there is more ways in life to be happy. You won't be fulfilled. Money's not going to make you happy. Doing that and hurting other people is just not on, in my view.
Yep. Mate, you running for Prime Minister or no? Hey, quick one for you. Types of ownership for the benefit of the listeners: joint tenants, tenants in common, and the difference.
Joint proprietors. You own the property jointly, severally, together. In the event of one death, a death of a person, the property pretty much gets automatically transferred over to the surviving proprietor. It's a simple form that needs to be done. Tenants in common is a discrete share that you own. You might have a 50-50 share, but you might dilute it down. It might be down to 99-1 or 90-10. If one person dies, and that's usually investors, husband and wives, so it might be for in tax purposes that the higher income earner wishes to hold
asset protection.
Asset protection,
which might be the consequences,
and might be the reverse situation. Yep. So, and we don't give tax advice, but we strongly recommend that you go and get your tax advice from your accountant. Tenants in common, if one person dies and they don't have a will, which is dying intestate, then state trustees will help you determine who gets that person's share. All the while, as the surviving person on title, you're paying the mortgage repayments. So if you do tenants in common, get a will.
Because you've got the rule of survival. I always sort of summarise it. The rule of survivorship applies for joint tenants, and then the tenants in common is really what you said as
it goes to your estate.
Goes to your estate, but if you don't have an estate drafted, they don't know what your wishes are, and it could end up going to a long lost, crazy Uncle Barry, and you don't
Christmas
want
in '74.
And what's often not known is you can actually combine the two, because you can actually have a husband and wife and a brother. Say, and the husband and wife can own 60% of a property, tenants in common with the brother 40%, but of the 60%, they can be joint tenants within the 60%.
Within that, but you can have a husband and wife as to 50% joint proprietors, and the husband as to another 50% as a tenant in common overall. So the brother could be the father.
Oh, you're really good at
husband.
this. You should do this for a living. That'll take a few people a little while. I'm skip back 15 seconds.
15-second go back. Yep. When you do look at a contract and a Section 32, what are some of the clauses that you're immediately looking for that you want to strike out, that you think...
Penalty interest.
Yep, penalty interest number one.
Unconscionable terms that are harsh and unreasonable to a purchaser. The contracts will always favour a vendor, the recipient of the money, which is why they favour that person, because they are receiving the money. If they don't receive that money on the due date, they're entitled to a penalty because they've gone and spent it elsewhere, or whatever the case might be, or they could spend it at the casino. But the some clauses will increase the prescribed rate of penalty interest and also add in what's called unforeseeable reasonable costs as well, which could include accommodation, storage, other sorts of expenses, bridging finance and everything like that. And there's no way that you can quantify those amounts.
So what is an acceptable percentage for late settlement?
The law at the moment, it's 10% plus 2% on top for property, so it's 12% per annum.
Per annum?
Yep. And what's the current interest rate, Ben? Roughly? 4. So you've got 8% on top of that 4% if you're paying a mortgage as a vendor to compensate you for liquidated damages. It's a reasonable sum of money. But to see a clause that increases that to 16, 17, 18%, 20%, I still see, then that's unconscionable.
Yep. So do you see many people, so where do you see it typically kicking in? So if someone's late, do you see most vendors being ruthless and say, give me from day one, or do you see them going... Day 2, day 3, or what are you seeing in practice?
When it's our vendor client, we'll usually have the conversation with them and say, look, you can charge it. It's going to be $200 or $300. But is that in the spirit of the contract, and what do you want to charge? Now, the man who took the air conditioning out of the wall, he would charge every cent that he could. But I've got a lot of vendor clients, and they're really good people, and they are not interested in profiting from a purchaser's inability to settle because their banks, cannot settle on the due date. So, but when we're the purchaser, we'll always seek an extension with a waiver of penalty interest, but we give framework, a background story to why we aren't able to settle. We had a request the other week and, hi, our client can't settle. Can you give us an extension of a week without penalties? And that was it.
Oops.
So that's a little bit of a red flag to a bull for me, because if you don't have the courtesy to inform us of why, then I'm not going to put your argument to the vendor. Spoke to the vendor, said my recommendation is charge.
There's no argument. You haven't given us a reason, a valid reason. So,
so we went back
common
and
sense.
charged
Bring
it.
on
Reasonable person test.
Reasonable person test. Bring in common sense. Give us a reason as to why. Now, okay, the situation might be that their finance hasn't been sorted, right? Okay, well, you don't have to be so direct about that. It's just still finalising a couple of areas to get the money together, or something along those lines. You don't have to be. My client can't get finance. This is a real problem. You know, the vendor doesn't want to hear that, but they potentially want to hear that there's a situation where the money's not together. We're waiting for some money to come offshore, whatever it might be. Okay, well, that's fair enough. Yeah.
Don't know about you, Ben, but I'm loving this really great information. I've got two more because I'm conscious of your time and our listeners' time. But SMSF, what differences from someone who's buying it in their own name versus SMSF, if any?
Okay. Within the SMSF, sometimes people will borrow. And in most cases, we've done several hundred SMSFs over the last 8 years, and the majority of our clients will borrow money. So you then need to set up Bare Trust, a Bare Trustee, which sits over to the side. So there is an added layer of, there's a complexity to the transaction that an ordinary person buying in an individual name now has from buying in an SMSF. But there are more stakeholders that key people that we're dealing with. We will always communicate with the accountant and the financial planner and copy the client in, and we insist that we go to them for the advice as to the name on title. What is the name of the company? Because we have known of situations in the past where people haven't done their due diligence as a legal practitioner or conveyancer. They've registered the wrong name, and then they've been required to send it back over, because you then expose the trust, the fund itself,
or it's in breach.
It's in breach and non-compliant.
Yeah, that's right. The Smurf can't own the property.
Smurf.
The Smurf
I
can't
like
own
the
the property.
I like the Smurf.
Well, it's
so
actually,
much
I'm
easier.
not taking credit for it. Someone from ASIC said it in a presentation I was delivering with them. There was a co-speaker.
I know the truth get in the way of a good story.
Well, but I just don't want to take. I don't want to take credit for Smurf, but I love it. So the Smurf can't own the property when there's a borrowing involved. So when there's gearing involved. So that's why the structure and the Bare Trust usually that's being set up needs to hold.
And that all comes from a federal piece of legislation, which is the SIS Act. So at a state level, we need to be familiar with all of the legislative acts, pieces of legislation that are available to us that we operate under. But now we need to understand the relevant sections to the SIS Act. So our work is more layered, it's more complex, and there's a greater degree of knowledge and acumen required in a Smurf than an ordinary person.
Yeah, because as a BA, I find it most difficult when at SMSF, I double check with the accountant and the planner, and I talk to the conveyancer.
And the bank. They get it wrong.
But I need to know what name needs to go on the contract, because I've got to tell you, there's so many differing opinions. Is the Bare Trust? Is the name of the super fund?
Yes, I'd like to address that. So
I agree.
In Victoria, it's different.
Here we go, drum roll.
Because I know that in the other states, we've had accountants from WA and financial planners ring us and scream, we must have this worded onto the contract. In Victoria, we have the ability to nominate. Now, that may not be the case in other states, I don't know. But you can sign as an individual person.
And or
nominee. And or nominee. And in fact, you don't even need the and or nominee, because your right to nominate sits at common law.
Okay, in Victoria.
But in Victoria. Out of habit, we write and or nominee. It gives clients comfort. But you'll see a contract that comes to you, ABC Super Fund. It might be ABC Super Proprietary Limited as trustee for the ABC Super Fund, and then as trustee for the ABC Custodian Proprietary Limited as trustee for the ABC Bare Trust.
That's a bit.
Now, who's got time to write all of that, firstly? But you don't need it. If you have your Bare Trustee set up by the time you find a property, and hopefully you have, if you've got yourself, sorted out in time, then you would write down ABC Custodian Proprietary Limited. You put your AC in there. You'll probably be required to sign a director's guarantee to guarantee the performance of the contract, which is required when anyone signs a company, under a company arrangement. But you do not have to sign with all of those other letters, because there's a document from the State Revenue Officer's perspective. There's a document that links that.
It's the inferred link, because I sat down on this broom purchase panicking around double stamp duty, because if you get the wrong name, that's the biggest challenge.
In WA.
In being stamped twice. So I know the horror stories that are out there. So I'm doing the same thing, sitting down going, all right, what do you want on the contract? Are we sure? And it is that inferred or, reference. So if it's in the bare trust and the linkage is in there, but you don't even need to show it. So same sort of thing. So our financial planner was saying, Michael here was saying, no, don't need it on there. And then the conveyancer over there saying, I want it on there. It's just inconsistent.
What's the takeaway in that case with Ben? You got to default to your conveyancer. Is that what you're saying?
WA, I do believe, because I've had advisors over there ring me in the past saying, you cannot do this, you cannot do this.
Yeah, which is not true, because it's federal.
We're not operating under WA legislation, we're operating under Victorian legislation. We have the right to nominate anyway. So you can have it in your individual name, Bryce, and it's not a problem. But Ben
the takeaway is that get your conveyancer, the person who's giving you your legal advice, to confirm, because all this is about making sure you don't pay double stamp duty.
Correct.
Because that's the big cost, and a huge cost at that.
But the complexity is where you pay the deposit. Because if you're buying it in your own name and or nominee, you've got to make sure that then the deposit's coming from your personal name, but that impacts on the super fund.
But then wouldn't you?
So you can still pay the deposit in the
personal
super, out of the super.
Yep.
You can't do that.
Right.
You should always make sure that the origins of the money are coming from the fund. So you can probably still sign and or nominee on the contract, but because you don't know the name, and in some states, this is where it gets even more, you don't set the bare trust up until you've got the contract on the property. And in other states, you can set the bare trust up before you. So there are checklists from good financial planners, good accountants, and good conveyancers should know. Lean on those professional people. You're paying them a professional fee to get it right, and ultimately they're in charge of that.
But think about settlement day. You're the one that has to make sure that it settles. So you've got to place a huge weight on your conveyancer or whoever you're taking, as Ben said, your legal advice in the state that you're buying. Is that the key takeaway here?
Correct. Absolutely.
Ben, you probably got one more. I've got
go ahead.
Spousal transfers. What are they and how can they benefit the listeners?
Clients usually come to us for spousal transfers for two reasons: divorce, or even through a consent order, or for tax purposes. And if their accountant has advised them that they're going to move out of their principal place of residence and rent it out, move into another property, and they want it under the husband's name, for example, then they'll come to us for a spousal transfer. No stamp duty is payable, regardless of the spousal transfer. It's not payable.
Can I just jump in there? If a tax accountant is telling you to do that gift of love for tax purposes, then that's going to be Part 4A of the anti-avoidance tax. They're doing it for other reasons. So the example may be that the wife believes that the property investment is worth holding on to, the property's worth holding on to for investment, but the husband may not believe that. So that's where the conversation, because you cannot do this for tax purposes. That is against the law. You've got to basically do it for other purposes outside of tax. But it might come out as, someone's told me I need to do it for tax purposes, but if they've got to have a conversation with their accountant around why, because they're just simply trying to do it to avoid tax. It's illegal. So you've got to make sure that if you're doing a transfer or a gift of love, to move it could be asset protection. It's got to be another dominant reason. And that's got to be the dominant reason you need to talk to your accountant about. Now, I'm no tax expert, but I'm just letting everyone know. They sit there and say, I'm doing this because I get a good tax outcome. Don't do it. Okay, it's just not.
Well, we advise our clients in writing and over the phone when we take instructions that if we are doing a spousal transfer, have you sought advice from your accountant? Because whilst there is no duty, we cannot comment as to any tax implications, CGT, that it might trigger.
Again, the specialist who is responsible for tax is a licensed tax agent. Usually we call them accountants. They're responsible for that.
Yes.
But in terms of the mechanics, they can transfer it without stamp duty to, as Ben said, gift of love.
Yep, gift of love.
Yeah, we call it gift of love here, but the irony of it is it's gift of love and affection, and divorce.
Breakdown of the relationship, breakdown of a marriage.
But it's commonly referred to as gift of love. Now, when I have a breakdown, I'm not saying, I love you, honey.
Gift. There's no gift. I'm not gifting you anything.
Oh, they have a love-hate relationship.
They're relatively...
He loves himself and she hates him.
The only court in the land that can cut through any type of, trusts and so forth like butter is the family court.
Yes.
So, which is a good thing because obviously, relationships do break down, and there's money and assets involved.
Very good, and I'm sure we could go on for hours.
Can I just say something before we wrap up then? If you've got a question around conveyancing and contracts, terms and conditions, those types, send them in to us because we'll get Nicole back on.
Yeah, we'll do a Q&A with Nicole.
We'll do a Q&A around, basically conveyancing and legal
I knew I was on
issues.
the ABC.
ABCD, I'd like to say.
Yeah, ABCD. So you don't listen to the podcast, do you? Because you don't know what ABCD means, do you?
I did.
Wouldn't you agree? I mean, we're going to break this into 2 parts.
Yes.
It's been terrific. We've gone for some technical advice. Of course, there's a Property Couch disclaimer here that you must use what we've said as a conversation starter with your conveyancer, with your legal practitioner, wherever you are. But hopefully there's been some food for thought for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. And you just got a sense of the complexities here. So it looks good, looks easy. We're dealing with high value transactions.
Mate, it's easy. You're just transferring one title from one person's name to another, aren't we? It can't be any complexity.
So get some advice.
Can I just say that I know you mentioned that conveyancing's not sexy. Well,
you qualify as sexy, but the actual conveyancing world doesn't.
We think conveyancing is fun, so we put the FU in fun.
Oh.
I wanted to do that at the end, Ivis, because I knew that you deleted
I love it. No, I like it.
Okay, yeah, no, that's in. That's in.
I like it.
We're just going to put an E on this version, just because I think that's what iTunes will say. Very good. We love having you on. We're going to do it again. So there's the call out to the troops. What are your conveyancing questions that we can get Nicole on an upcoming episode? Because I think it's been really fun. Hey Ben, life hack.
Life hack. Go for it.
You ready for this one?
Yes.
We've got young kids.
Yep.
So what I've been doing for some time is I use Dropbox. Are you a Dropbox user? Mm-hmm. So I've got the app on my phone. And what they've got now is if I want to copy a receipt or anything, I'll put it against a contrasting background, I'll create a little border, and then that's all it'll take the photo of, which is really cool. So the way I use that is Jack or Sam come home and they've got a bit of art that they've done at kinder at school. So 2 things. I've created a little folder on my Dropbox called Keepsakes. And then within that Keepsakes folder, I then have Jack and Sam folder. And then when they come home, Daddy, have a look at my painting, I do 2 things. I take a photo with them holding the painting, and then I take a photo of the painting and I put it up to Dropbox. Because then I've actually got it. And so I've just been accumulating for the last couple of years all these keepsakes for the kids. So on their 21st, I can pull out and say, hey, look, I was so interested in what you got. It takes me about...
Father of the year.
Takes me about 15 seconds to do it.
Sudden I just
makes a huge impact.
But
But here's the life hack. My wife can then grab it in a week's time and put it in the bin and feel very, no guilt about the fact that there's no storage. So
I'm going to hold up my bad dad sign.
That is my life hack.
That is a ripper.
I've got kinder
really
stuff.
like
I've got Jack's in prep, so I've got all the stuff. I've got his first day of prep, everything. Like the first lunch order, I've taken a photo of that. Oh, so he's got it. I know.
That is gold.
And I've got a life hack for you, mate.
Oh, another one. A bonus life hack.
Well, I know you love the sticky note one so much. So
Someone's
so this one's for you. I want
idea.
you to put because you're always worried about people pinching your pens. I want you to put a blue ink cartridge into a red pen because no one steals a red pen. Think about it.
It's a good little one.
No one ever steals a red pen. So, mate, that's another. That's a freebie for you, mate.
I mean, I think the big takeout is that I probably need to buy more pens for the office. But I like that. I like that life.
So, Dropbox for the rest of us and for you, Ben.
Okay. Yep.
Blue ink cartridge.
I've got my pen right in front of me.
In a red pen. And just a shout out to the listeners. Let me know. I'm under enormous pressure for these life hacks. If you've got some good ones, Ben heckled me last week. So
I've just thought of one. I'll get Ivis to write it down because it's a really good app.
Because they're the ones that I've got to implement myself. So I haven't done the red pen, but let me know how it goes.
I will do.
Did you know
that, and I've mentioned this very briefly, but I'm just going to expand on it in a previous podcast. But did you know that in certain European countries, during certain periods of time, when the wealthy owned most of the property, they introduced a window tax. Okay, so the window tax was a property tax based on the number of windows in a house. It was a significant social, cultural and architectural force in England, France, Ireland, Scotland during the 18th and 19th centuries. So it's pretty amazing. Now, it lasted in England from 1696 to 1851. 156 years where they introduced this tax So if you're ever going around, and there's a great picture on Wikipedia, so I'll give the link because it's pretty cool, right? Where they've actually blocked windows out on buildings. They've actually had them stonemasoned in, and so you don't have to pay as much tax on that window. So that's pretty cool. Now, just to give you an idea, in France, it was established in 1798 and was repealed in only 1926.
Wow.
There's a did you know. How about that one? Yeah. And in Scotland, both window taxes for similar reasons. So pretty cool stuff. I mean, so, you know, if we're going to talk about housing affordability, and because you're picking on investors in Australia all the time, one, banks, two, people who think that we're creating housing affordability issues, why don't you just make us pay a window tax? All right, come on, are you listening? Just force it upon us that investors have to pay a window tax. See how that goes down, government.
There'll be a sudden boom in common walls.
Properties natural light would no longer be important for people.
That's not
anyway, I thought that one was pretty cool.
I'm impressed.
Okay, is that right?
Interesting.
Yeah, so there we go, Ben. So we're getting the wind up from Ibis. We are going to turn this into two parts, but I think it's been well worth the effort. I think there's been some unbelievable gold. We've unpacked lots of gold there. So, Nicole, it's always a pleasure catching up with you. Thanks for coming on the couch.
Thanks for having me.
It. It's just great having banter with you all the time. I love your work. I love what you do. I know what you do is fun and sexy.
yeah, exactly. And until next week, Ben.
See you later.
See you later, folks.
Bye.